You'll be comfortable enough in here, Willa. We've cleared some space. Derek gestured around the garage as if showing me a luxury suite, not a makeshift bedroom wedged between paint cans and gardening equipment. A thin fold-out cot with a single pillow and blanket sat in the corner. My new accommodations after 12 years of helping raise my granddaughter. The overhead fluorescent light flickered, casting harsh shadows across his face as he avoided my eyes. "It's just temporary until we figure things out," he added, already backing toward the door. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." I stood motionless, my small suitcase still in hand, as the garage door closed behind him. Through the small window, I watched him jog back to the main house, my daughter's beautiful home that I had helped them afford with my life savings. The same home where I'd nursed my granddaughter through chickenpox, tutored her through struggling school years, and kept the household running while they built their careers. And now, at 65, I was sleeping in their garage. My name is Wilhelmina Thorne, Willa to everyone who knows me. For 40 years, I taught 5th grade at Oak Ridge Elementary, helping shape the minds of countless children who now have children of their own. Teaching wasn't just my career, it was my calling. I believed that every child deserved patience, understanding, and someone who would fight for their potential. I carried this belief into my personal life, especially with my only daughter, Allison. When Allison married Derek Thompson, I was hesitant but supportive. He had ambition but seemed to measure success only in dollar signs and status symbols. Still, he made my daughter happy, and I kept my reservations to myself. When she gave birth to Olivia, my beautiful Liv, my heart expanded in ways I never thought possible. Grandmotherhood was a gift I cherished without reservation. My life changed dramatically the day Allison called me sobbing. She'd been offered her dream position at a prestigious real estate agency, but childcare costs would eat up most of her salary. Derek was climbing the corporate ladder and working 60-hour weeks. They were drowning. "Mom, I don't know what to do," she cried. "I've worked so hard for this opportunity." I didn't hesitate. "I'll help. I'll be there." Within a month, I had rented out my modest home in Cherry Creek and moved into Allison and Derek's guest bedroom in Lakeside Heights. The arrangement seemed perfect. I'd help with Liv in the household while they built their careers, and they'd provide me with a place to stay during my early retirement years. No one mentioned it was temporary. No one set an end date. For 12 years, I poured everything into that family. I was the one who packed Liv's lunches, helped with homework, drove her to soccer practice, and sat through piano recitals. I learned to cook Derek's favorite meals and kept the house running like clockwork, all while Allison and Derek built impressive careers, renovated their home, and took lavish vacations, sometimes leaving me with Liv for weeks at a time. I wasn't looking for gratitude. I did it out of love, believing that family supports family. I believed we were building something together, a home, a legacy, a life woven from shared sacrifice and joy. The day everything changed started like any other. I was preparing lasagna, Derek's favorite, for a Friday family dinner. Liv, now 10 and growing more independent, was helping me chop vegetables for the salad. We were laughing about something that had happened at school when Derek and Allison came home early, their expressions guarded in a way that made my stomach tighten. "Mom," Allison said, her voice unnecessarily formal, "we need to talk after dinner." All through the meal, conversation felt strained. Liv seemed to sense the tension, her usual chatter subdued. After she went upstairs to finish homework, Derek cleared his throat. "Willa, Allison, and I have been discussing our living situation," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. Allison jumped in. "Mom, you've been amazing with Liv all these years, and we're so grateful. But she's becoming more independent now, and we think, well, We think it's time for us to have our space back as a nuclear family." The words hung in the air like smoke, acrid and suffocating. "Oh," I managed, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth. "I see." "It's not that we don't appreciate everything you've done," Derek added quickly, his corporate diplomacy in full swing. "It's just that Liv is at an age where she needs to develop more independence, and frankly, the dynamic in the house feels unbalanced sometimes." Unbalanced. As if my presence, the woman who had given up her home, her independence, and dedicated over a decade to their family, was somehow tipping some invisible scale. "When would you like me to leave?" I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my voice when everything inside me was crumbling. They exchanged a quick glance. "Well, that's the thing," Allison said, fidgeting with her napkin. "The housing market in Cherry Creek has gotten so expensive since you left, and we know your pension only goes so far." Derek jumped in smoothly. "We've been thinking. The garage apartment, well, it's more of a storage area now. But we could clear some space. Make it comfortable for you. That way, you'd still be close to Liv, but we'd all have our own space." The garage. They wanted to move me to the garage like an old piece of furniture they weren't quite ready to dispose of, but didn't want displayed in the main house. "It would be temporary," Allison added hastily. "Just until you figure out your next steps." I sat there, the pasta now cold on my plate, as 12 years of sacrifice crystallized into this single, humiliating moment. They hadn't viewed me as building a life with them. I had always been a convenient solution, a live-in nanny they no longer needed. I should have argued. I should have reminded them of the $75,000 from my retirement savings that helped with their down payment on this house, money they had promised to repay, but never did. I should have pointed out that I had given up rental income from my own property to help them. Instead, I nodded silently, excused myself from the table, and walked to my room. No, their guest room, in a daze. That night, as I stared at the ceiling, I made a decision. I would not cause a scene. I would not make Liv witness an ugly confrontation. But I also would not be discarded like this without a plan. The next morning, as Derek and Allison slept in, as they always did on Saturdays, while I made breakfast for Liv, I called my younger sister, Barbara. "They did what?" Barb's voice cracked with indignation when I explained the situation. "The garage? After everything you've done? Willa, you need to stand up for yourself." "I know, Barb, I'm just processing." "Come stay with me," she said immediately. "The farmhouse is plenty big, and I could use the company." The offer was tempting. Barb's place in Pine Valley was beautiful, a renovated farmhouse with gardens that supplied her small but successful flower shop. But it was 2 hours away from Liv, and the thought of that distance made my heart ache. "Let me think about it," I said. "In the meantime, could you recommend a good attorney? I think I need to understand my options." There was surprise in Barb's voice. "An attorney?" "Well, yes. Linda Chen helped me with the paperwork when I bought the shop. She's sharp as a tack. But Willa, what are you thinking?" I wasn't entirely sure myself, but something had shifted inside me. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I just need to know where I stand. I've given so much to this family, Barb. Financially, emotionally, practically. I need to know if I have any rights here. Within a week, I was moved into the garage apartment. Derek had cleared a path, threw the storage boxes and set up a fold-out cot, a small desk, and a floor lamp. The concrete floor was partially covered by an old area rug. The bathroom was technically functional, though the shower had been used to store gardening tools for so long that the drain was clogged with soil and debris. There was no kitchen, just a mini fridge and a microwave balanced on a plastic storage bin. "See? It's cozy," Derek said with forced enthusiasm. "And you'll still take meals with us in the main house, of course. Allison at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We'll work on making it nicer, Mom. Maybe some curtains." Liv stood in the doorway, her young face clouded with confusion. "Why is Grandma moving to the garage? Did she do something wrong?" "No, sweetie," Derek answered. "Before I could. Grandma just needs her own space now that you're getting bigger. It's like having her own little apartment." The words stung like salt in an open wound. A decade of devotion reframed as me somehow needing space from the family I had given everything to support. That night, lying on the thin cot and listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional scurrying of what I suspected were mice, I made an appointment with Linda Chen. The attorney's office was in a smart brick building in downtown Lakeside Heights. Linda herself was a petite woman with keen eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Thorne," she said after I'd explained my situation, "from what you've told me, you have several potential claims here. The money you contributed to their house purchase could be viewed as a loan or even an investment. The years of unpaid childcare and household management have significant value. And if there was an implicit agreement that you would have a place to live in exchange for these services, they can't simply change the terms unilaterally." I twisted the tissue in my hands. "I don't want to sue my daughter, Ms. Chen. I understand that. But knowledge is power, and right now you need to know where you stand." She leaned forward. "Tell me more about this arrangement. Was anything ever put in writing?" I shook my head. "It was family. I never thought we needed paperwork." Linda nodded sympathetically. "Unfortunately, that's common. But let's focus on what we can prove. Do you have records of the money you contributed to their house?" "Yes, I have the bank transfer statements." "Good. And would your daughter or son-in-law ever acknowledge in writing, say, in texts or emails, the childcare and household work you provided?" I thought about the countless thank you texts over the years, the Mother's Day cards saying, "They couldn't manage without me." "Yes, I believe so." "Excellent." Linda made notes on her legal pad. "Now, about your current housing situation. Do you feel safe in the garage?" The question caught me off guard. Safe? I suppose, though it's not comfortable. The temperature fluctuates, there are probably mice, and I'm fairly certain there's mold in the bathroom. "Mrs. Thorne, residential spaces have to meet certain habitability standards, even for family members. What they've provided you doesn't sound legal or safe." She set down her pen. "I'm not suggesting we go straight to litigation, but I do think a carefully worded letter from my office might help your family recognize the seriousness of your situation." I hesitated, the prospect of escalating matters filling me with dread. What would this do to my relationship with Allison? With Liv? Linda seemed to read my thoughts. "Consider this. By not addressing the situation properly, you're teaching your granddaughter that it's acceptable to discard people once they've served their purpose. Is that the lesson you want her to learn?" Her words hit me like a splash of cold water. I'd spent my life teaching children about respect, fairness, and standing up for themselves. Now, in my silence, I was teaching Liv the opposite. "Write the letter," I said quietly. "But please, be diplomatic. I want them to understand what they're doing, not just feel threatened." Linda nodded. "I'll draft something for your review. In the meantime, document everything: the condition of the garage, any conversations about your role in the family, any expenses you continue to cover. And if you have photos from over the years showing your involvement with your granddaughter, gather those too." As I left her office, I felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. For the first time in years, someone was advocating for me rather than the other way around. That evening, as I sat on my cot reviewing old photos on my tablet, Liv's first day of kindergarten, her ballet recital where I'd sewn her costume by hand, the summer I taught her to swim, Derek knocked on the garage door. "Willa, can I come in?" He entered without waiting for my response, looking around the garage with the slightly uncomfortable expression of someone confronting the consequences of their actions. "We're ordering pizza for dinner. Liv asked if you'd eat with us." He paused. "How are you settling in?" I set my tablet down. "It's an adjustment." He nodded, clearly not wanting to engage further. "Well, dinner's at 6. As he turned to leave, I found my voice. "Derek, do you remember when Liv had pneumonia in 2nd grade?" He paused, hand on the doorknob. "Vaguely. She was pretty sick. She was hospitalized for 3 days. You and Allison were both at that real estate conference in San Diego. I sat by her hospital bed for 72 hours straight. I helped her with the breathing treatments when she was terrified of the mask. I read her 14 books and watched every episode of that cartoon she loved." His shoulders stiffened. "What's your point, Willa?" "My point is that I've been more than just convenient help. I've been a parent to Liv when you and Allison couldn't be, and parents don't get relegated to garages when they become inconvenient." He turned, his expression hardening. "We appreciate everything you've done, but Allison and I need to establish clearer boundaries now. Liv is our daughter. Yes, she is, and I would never dispute that. But I'm also not just a live-in servant you can put away when you're done with my services." Something like guilt flickered across his face before he mastered it. "No one is saying that. This is just a transitional solution." Transitioning? To what exactly? Have you and Allison considered what happens next for me? Where I'm supposed to go? How I'm supposed to support myself after giving 12 years to your family?" He cleared his throat. "You still have your pension. And your house in Cherry Creek, which has been rented at below market rate for 12 years because I didn't need the income while living here," I cut in. "The rent barely covers the property taxes and maintenance. And need I remind you of the money I contributed to this house? Money that was supposed to be repaid?" His expression closed off completely. "I think Allison and I have been more than generous, Willa. We've provided you with a place to live for over a decade. Food, utilities, family vacations. It hasn't been one-sided." The injustice of his framing made me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it was steadier than I expected. "I'll see you at dinner, Derek. And please let Allison know I'd like to have a proper conversation about our arrangement soon. All 3 of us, with clarity and honesty." After he left, I sat trembling on my cot. It was the first time in years I had directly challenged Derek's narrative. The first time I had advocated for myself instead of smoothing things over. The feeling was terrifying, but also strangely exhilarating. The next morning, I woke early as usual. Despite being banished to the garage, I still maintained my routine of preparing breakfast for Liv before school. As I was scrambling eggs in the main house kitchen, Allison appeared, already dressed for work in a smart blazer and pencil skirt. "Mom, you don't have to keep making breakfast every day," she said, pouring herself coffee. "We can manage," I continued whisking. "I like doing it. Liv and I have our morning chats while she eats." Allison sighed. "That's part of the problem, Mom. You've inserted yourself so deeply into every routine that Liv relies on you for everything. Derek and I need space to parent our own child." I set down the whisk, turning to face her fully. "Inserted myself? Allison, you begged me to help you. You cried on the phone about not being able to take that job if you didn't have reliable childcare. I gave up my home, my independence, and my retirement plans to support your family. That wasn't insertion, that was sacrifice." She had the grace to look somewhat abashed. "I know, and we're grateful. But things change. Liv's needs change. Our family's needs change." "And what about my needs? Did you consider those before deciding I should sleep in a garage with mice and mold?" Her eyes widened. "Mice? Mom, if there are mice, we'll call an exterminator. And there's no mold. There's black mold in the shower drain and around the small window. The temperature dropped to 58 degrees last night. The extension cord you're using for the mini fridge is frayed. Shall I continue? Allison looked genuinely shocked. I didn't know. Derek said he'd made it comfortable. Derek cleared a path through your stored holiday decorations and gardening equipment. That's not the same as creating a livable space. I poured the eggs into the heated pan. Allison, we need to have a serious conversation about what happens next. Not just for the next few weeks, but long term. She glanced at her watch. I have a showing at 9. Can we talk tonight? Yes, after Liv goes to bed. And please make sure Derek is there too. She nodded, grabbed her coffee, and headed for the door, pausing briefly. Mom? I do love you. This isn't about not wanting you in our lives. I managed a small smile. I know you love me, honey, but love without respect isn't enough, not anymore. As I served Liv her breakfast, watching her sleepily butter her toast while telling me about her science project, I felt a new resolve hardening within me. For her sake as much as mine, I needed to model what healthy boundaries and self-respect looked like. I needed to show her that grandmothers, that women of any age, deserve dignity and fair treatment, especially from those they love most. Later that day, as I was tidying up my meager space in the garage, my phone chimed with an email from Linda Chen. The subject line read, Draft Letter for Review, Thompson Family Agreement. I sat on my cot and opened the attachment, my heart racing as I read the firm but fair language Linda had crafted. The letter outlined my contributions to the family, financial, practical, and emotional, and proposed several options for moving forward. It requested a formal acknowledgement of the money I had contributed to their house purchase, with a repayment plan. It detailed the market value of the childcare and household management I had provided. Most importantly, it stated clearly that the garage accommodation failed to meet basic habitability standards and represented a breach of our implied agreement. The letter concluded by expressing hope for an amicable resolution, while making it clear that legal action remained an option if necessary. My finger hovered over the Approve button for several long moments. This would change everything. There would be no going back to the comfortable denial that had characterized our family dynamic for years. But then I thought of Liv, watching as they moved her grandmother to the garage. I thought of the lessons she would learn from this moment, about how we treat the elderly, about the value of care work, about standing up for oneself. I pressed Approve and set down my phone, exhaling slowly. Tonight's conversation with Allison and Derek would be difficult, but I was no longer approaching it from a position of weakness. I had options, I had rights, and most importantly, I had found my voice again. The garage door creaked open, startling me from my thoughts. Liv stood there, backpack still on, her expression troubled. Grandma, why are you really out here? She asked without preamble. I patted the space beside me on the cot. Come sit, sweetheart. She dropped her backpack and sat, her small hand finding mine instinctively. Your mom and dad felt it was time for some changes in our living arrangement, I said carefully. But you took care of me my whole life, she said, her brow furrowed with the pure logic of childhood. You help me with homework and make my lunches and know how to braid my hair the right way. Why would they make you live in the garage? Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. Sometimes adults make decisions that aren't always fair, I said, choosing my words carefully. But I want you to know that no matter where I sleep, I will always be your grandmother. I will always love you and be there for you. She leaned against me, her head on my shoulder. I told Dad it wasn't right. He said I should mind my own business. A flicker of anger ignited in my chest. Did he now? She nodded. But you taught me that when something isn't right, we should speak up. That's what you always say at bedtime. I smiled, remembering our nightly ritual, a story, a life lesson, and a kiss on the forehead. How many such moments would I miss? now that I'd been exiled to the garage? That's right, Liv. Speaking up is important. And so is being kind and fair to others, especially those who have cared for us. She looked up at me, her young face solemn. I'm going to speak up for you, Grandma. I hugged her close, my heart swelling with both pride and concern. Thank you, sweetheart, but this is something the adults need to work out. I don't want you to feel caught in the middle. As she left to start her homework, I reflected on the wisdom children often possess, a clarity unclouded by adult rationalizations and self-interest. Liv could see the fundamental unfairness of the situation, in a way her parents had become blind to. That evening, after a tense family dinner where Liv pointedly asked why I couldn't sit in my usual chair, instead of the folding chair brought in from the garage, I prepared for my conversation with Allison and Derek. I had changed into one of my better outfits, a simple blue dress I'd worn to parent-teacher conferences for decades, and applied a touch of lipstick. Small armor, perhaps, but it helped me feel more like Teacher Willa than displaced mother-in-law Willa. At precisely 9 o'clock, after Liv had been tucked in, I knocked on the door of the main house. Derek answered, surprise registering on his face at my formal appearance. Come in, he said. Allison's in the living room. I followed him, noting how strange it felt to be a visitor in a home I had helped create. The living room was immaculate. I had vacuumed it just yesterday morning, arranged the throw pillows, and watered the plants. My touches were everywhere, yet I no longer belonged. Allison sat on the sofa, an open laptop in front of her. Mom? We were just looking at some options for you. I sat in the armchair across from them, back straight, hands folded in my lap. Before we discuss that, I want to talk about how we got here. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Willa, we've already explained— No, you haven't, I interrupted, gently but firmly. You've made decisions and informed me of them. That's not the same as a discussion between equals, which is what we should be having. Allison's expression turned wary. What do you mean? I mean that for 12 years, I have been an integral part of this family. I have provided childcare that would have cost you upwards of $25,000 annually. I have managed this household, prepared meals, handled Liv's educational support, and been on call 24/7. I contributed $75,000 to the purchase of this house, money that was supposed to be repaid but never was. And in return, I'm now sleeping in a garage that isn't legally habitable. They exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by my directness. Mom, we appreciate everything you've done, Allison began, falling back on the familiar refrain. Appreciation would be shown through actions, not words, I replied. And your actions tell a different story. Derek leaned forward, his business negotiation face slipping into place. What exactly are you saying, Willa? What do you want? I want a fair resolution. I want acknowledgement of my contributions, financial, practical, and emotional. And I want a plan for my future that reflects that acknowledgement. We were actually looking at some nice senior living communities, Allison said, turning her laptop toward me. There's one in Pine Valley, near Aunt Barb. They have activities, communities, independence. And who would pay for this senior living? I asked, already knowing the answer. Well, you have your pension, Derek said. And if you sold your house in Cherry Creek, the house that has been rented at below market rates because I was living here helping your family? I shook my head. That house represents my only financial security, and my pension barely covers basic living expenses, as you well know. Allison's expression hardened slightly. Mom, what exactly are you expecting from us? I took a deep breath. I expect to be treated with dignity. I expect the money that was contributed to this house to be repaid, as was originally agreed. And I expect some recognition of the services I've provided this family for over a decade. Derek's business smile disappeared entirely. Are you threatening us, Willa? I'm being clear about my expectations. There's a difference. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Allison spoke, her voice tight. I think we all need to sleep on this. We can talk more tomorrow. I nodded and stood. That's fine. But just so we're completely transparent, I've consulted with an attorney about my situation, Linda Chen. She's drafting a letter outlining my contributions and the options for fair resolution. The color drained from Derek's face. You got a lawyer involved? Against your own family? I got a lawyer involved to protect my interests, since it became clear no one else in this family was going to do so, I corrected gently. The letter should arrive tomorrow. I hope we can resolve this amicably, for Liv's sake if nothing else. As I walked back to my garage apartment, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The path ahead wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in years, I was walking it on my own terms, standing up for my worth and my dignity. In the darkness of the garage, surrounded by holiday decorations and gardening tools, I whispered a promise to myself. This isn't the end of my story. It's just the beginning of a new chapter. The morning after my confrontation with Allison and Derek, I woke to the sound of rain drumming against the garage roof. A small puddle had formed beneath the window where the weather stripping had deteriorated, and a chill permeated the concrete space. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and checked my phone. 6:30 a.m., my usual wake-up time despite no longer being responsible for getting Liv ready for school. Old habits die hard, especially those forged from love. I waited for the sound of activity from the main house, but silence prevailed. Typically, I'd be in the kitchen by now, preparing Liv's favorite oatmeal with brown sugar and cinnamon, setting out her vitamins, packing her lunch while she showered. I wondered if Allison had remembered that Liv needed her permission slip signed for tomorrow's field trip, or that she preferred her sandwich cut diagonally, not in rectangles. Through the small window, I watched as the lights in the main house finally flickered on at 7:15. Late, Liv would be rushing now, stressed before her school day even began. I fought the urge to hurry over and smooth the morning's inevitable chaos. This is what they wanted, I reminded myself. Space to be a nuclear family, space to parent without my interference. At 7:40, I saw them rush to the car, Liv's hair unbrushed, Allison still fastening her blazer, Derek carrying both his briefcase and what appeared to be a hastily assembled lunch bag. No umbrella despite the rain. The car backed out of the driveway with a squeal of tires, 10 minutes after Liv should have been at school. I sighed and began my own morning routine, modified for my new circumstances. The garage had no shower facilities, so I had been using the bathroom in the main house during their absence. I grabbed my toiletry bag and headed over, using the spare key I still possessed. The kitchen was a disaster, cereal bowls half filled with milk, a pot of burned oatmeal crusted to the stove, coffee spilled across the counter. I stood for a moment, torn between my ingrained habit of cleaning up and my new resolution to let them experience the consequences of their decision. Let it be, Willa, I told myself. This isn't your responsibility anymore. After a quick shower and change of clothes, I returned to the garage to wait for Linda's letter to arrive. Around noon, my phone chimed with a text from Derek. A legal letter was delivered to my office this morning. Is this really how you want to handle things? We're family. I took a deep breath before responding. Family treats each other with respect and fairness. I'm open to discussion once you and Allison have read the letter thoroughly. No response came, but I hadn't expected one. Derek had always retreated when confronted directly, preferring to regroup and strategize rather than engage in the moment. At 3:30, I walked the 4 blocks to Liv's bus stop. This had been our routine for years. I would meet her after school, and we'd walk home together, those 15 minutes filled with stories about her day, questions about homework, and observations. About the neighborhood. Though I'd been told my childcare services were no longer needed, no one had explicitly said I couldn't meet her bus. When the yellow school bus pulled up, Liv was one of the last children off, her face brightening when she spotted me. "Grandma." She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You came." "Of course I did, sweetheart. How was school?" As we walked, she told me about her science project on ecosystems, the playground drama between two friends, and how her teacher had praised her book report, Normalcy in the Midst of Upheaval. "Mom was really mad this morning," she confided, kicking at a stone on the sidewalk. "She couldn't find my permission slip, and Dad burned the oatmeal." "Mornings can be hectic," I said neutrally. "You always had everything ready," she said, looking up at me with clear eyes. "Mom said we have to adjust to a new routine now, but I don't understand why we need a new routine at all." Before I could formulate a response that wouldn't undermine her parents, she added, "Tyler from my class said when his grandma got old, they put her in a special home with other old people. Is that what's going to happen to you?" The innocent question knocked the wind out of me. "Who said anything about that?" "I heard Mom and Dad talking last night after you went back to the garage. Dad said something about senior options and—" Mom was looking at websites. We had reached the driveway of the house and I stopped, kneeling to look Liv in the eye. "Liv, listen to me. I'm not going anywhere far away unless I choose to. And whatever happens, you and I will always be close. You're my girl, and nothing changes that." She nodded solemnly. "Promise?" "I promise." I stood up, wincing slightly as my knees protested. "Now, let's get you inside and started on that homework." "But you don't live inside anymore," she said, the simple truth landing like a blow. "I'm still allowed to visit," I said with a smile I didn't entirely feel. "Come on, I'll help you with those ecosystem diagrams." As we approached the front door, it swung open to reveal Allison, still in her work clothes, her expression a complex mixture of surprise and irritation. "Mom, what are you doing? I was about to leave to pick up Liv from the bus." "No need." I walked down to meet her like always. Liv hurried past her mother into the house, dropping her backpack in the entryway. A habit I'd tried unsuccessfully to break for years. "We agreed that Derek and I would handle Liv's schedule from now on," Allison said, lowering her voice. "Did we? I don't recall an explicit conversation about the bus stop." I kept my tone light, conversational. Besides, I was already out for a walk, and it seemed silly not to meet her. Allison's jaw tightened. "Mom, we got the letter from your attorney this morning." "Good. Then you understand my position." "I understand that you've chosen to make this adversarial instead of working it out within the family." I gazed steadily at my daughter, this woman I had raised, then helped raise her child, sacrificing my own plans and comforts for the well-being of her family. "I chose to advocate for myself when it became clear you and Derek wouldn't. There's a difference." Behind her, Liv appeared, in the hallway, watching our exchange with the hypervigilance of children who sense conflict. "Can Grandma help me with my science project?" she asked. She knows all about ecosystems from her teaching days. Allison hesitated, clearly torn between her frustration with me and her desire not to upset Liv. "Fine," she conceded. "But dinner's at 6, and afterward, we need to talk, Mom." I nodded and followed Liv to the dining room table where she spread out her school supplies. For the next hour, I helped her create a diagram of a forest ecosystem, complete with producers, consumers, and decomposers. The familiar rhythm of teaching, asking leading questions, offering encouragement, watching understanding dawn, provided a welcome respite from the tension with Allison. At 6 o'clock, Derek arrived home, his expression darkening when he saw me at the table with Liv. He disappeared into the kitchen where Allison was preparing dinner, and I could hear their hushed, intense conversation, though not the specific words. Dinner was a stilted affair. Derek spoke mainly to Liv, asking about her day and her project. Allison maintained a tight smile, serving the chicken casserole that had always been one of my specialties, but now featured undercooked rice and overly browned edges. I ate quietly, complimenting the meal politely when appropriate. After Liv was excused to finish her homework, Derek cleared his throat. "Willa, about this letter from your attorney." "Yes?" I sipped my water, determined to remain calm. "Some of these claims are preposterous. $300,000 for household management and childcare services, a demand for repayment of the $75,000 plus interest, the implication that we've provided substandard housing." "Are they preposterous, Derek? The going rate for full-time nannies in this area is around $25 per hour. Over 12 years, that adds up to far more than what the letter requests. The $75,000 was explicitly a loan to help with your down payment, which you and Allison promised to repay when things settled down. And as for the housing," I gestured around the immaculate house, "I wasn't referring to this. I was referring to the uninsulated, partially flooded garage where I'm currently sleeping between holiday decorations and gardening equipment." Allison's face had reddened. "Mom, we never signed anything about repaying that money. It was a gift." "It was absolutely not a gift," I replied, keeping my voice level. "We discussed the terms clearly. I have the emails where you both thanked me for the loan and promised repayment. I never would have given away that much of my retirement savings." Derek's businessman composure slipped slightly. "Even if that's true, this approach is completely unnecessary. We're family. We could have worked something out without lawyers." "When exactly?" I asked. "Before or after you moved me to the garage without discussion? Before or after you started researching senior living options without my input?" I saw Allison's surprised expression and added, "Yes, I know about that. Liv overheard you." Derek cursed under his breath. "She shouldn't be eavesdropping on adult conversations. She shouldn't have to hear her parents plotting to ship her grandmother off to a facility either," I countered. "Derek, Allison, I'm not doing this to hurt you or to get revenge. I'm doing it because I need security for my future, and you've demonstrated that I can't count on you to consider my needs or wishes." Allison's eyes had filled with tears. "Mom, that's not fair. We've provided for you for 12 years. "No, Allison, I've provided for this family for 12 years. Free childcare, household management, emotional support. I've been on call 24/7, with no vacations, no personal time, no acknowledgement of the value of my labor. And now that Liv is more independent, I'm suddenly expendable." I folded my napkin neatly. "That's what's not fair." Derek's business mask slipped back into place. "What exactly do you want, Willa? Money? Your old room back? What will make this situation go away?" The dismissive way he referred to my legitimate grievances, this situation, confirmed I had made the right decision in seeking legal counsel. I want what the letter outlines: acknowledgement of my contributions, repayment of the loan with reasonable interest, and either suitable housing or compensation that allows me to secure my own housing. I'm not trying to bankrupt you or separate you from Liv. I'm trying to ensure I have security and dignity in my remaining years." Derek exchanged a glance with Allison. "We'll need to discuss this privately." I stood from the table. "Of course. I'll say goodnight to Liv before I go back to the garage." As I passed through the living room where Liv was working, she looked up from her homework. "Are you and Mom and Dad fighting?" I sat beside her on the sofa. "We're having a disagreement about grown-up things, but I want you to know that all of us love you very much, and nothing will change that." She leaned against me. "I don't want you to go away, Grandma." "I know, sweetheart." I kissed the top of her head. "Whatever happens, you and I will always have our special bond. Now, finish that homework and get ready for bed. I'll see you tomorrow." As I walked back to the garage through the light rain, I felt both drained and strangely empowered. For years, I had avoided conflict, smoothed over disagreements, put everyone else's needs before my own. Now, for perhaps the first time since Robert died 15 years ago, I was standing up for myself, demanding the respect and consideration I deserved. Back in the garage, I called Barbara to update her. "They got the letter?" she asked immediately. "This morning. Derek's nose is out of joint that I involved an attorney, and Allison's feelings are hurt. But they're actually talking about my needs now instead of just dismissing them." "Good. It's about time they consider someone besides themselves." Barb had never quite warmed to Derek, sensing his self-interest from the beginning. "How are you holding up in that garage?" The offer to come stay with me still stands. "I know, and I appreciate it. But I need to see this through, Barb. If I leave now, they'll rewrite the narrative. Poor Mom, overreacting and running away instead of discussing things like adults. Well, you're stronger than I am. I'd have told them where to stick their gardening tools the moment they suggested the garage." I laughed, the sound echoing oddly in the cavernous space. "That's why I always had to bail you out of trouble growing up." After hanging up, I prepared for bed as best I could in the limited facilities. The temperature had dropped again, and the thin blanket provided little warmth. I layered on 2 sweaters, grateful I had packed practical clothing rather than just the neat outfits I typically wore around the house. Sleep eluded me as I lay on the uncomfortable cot, listening to the rain intensify outside and considering my options. Linda had outlined several potential paths forward in her letter. The most aggressive would involve a lawsuit for elder financial abuse and breach of contract, seeking not just the return of my loan but substantial damages for unpaid services. I had no appetite for such a contentious approach, however legally sound it might be. The option I preferred was a structured agreement. Repayment of the loan over time, acknowledgement of my contributions to the family, and either proper housing within their home or financial support for independent living, with regular visitation rights to live. Around midnight, a soft knock came at the garage door. I sat up, switching on the floor lamp, and called out, "Yes?" The door opened to reveal Allison, wrapped in her bathrobe, her feet bare despite the cold concrete floor. "Mom? Can we talk?" I shifted to make space on the cot. "Of course." She sat beside me, looking around the garage with fresh eyes, seeing, perhaps for the first time, the reality of the space where she had relegated her mother. The temperature had dropped enough that her breath formed small clouds in the air. "It's freezing in here," she said, hugging herself. "Yes. The insulation is minimal, and there's no proper heating." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I didn't really look at this space before we decided. Derek said he'd make it comfortable." Derek's idea of comfortable and mine apparently differ significantly. She nodded slowly. "Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you really think Derek and I would take advantage of you? After everything we've been through as a family?" I considered my answer carefully. "I don't think you consciously set out to exploit me, no. But I do think you both became accustomed to the conveniences I provided. And when those conveniences became less necessary, you found it easier to distance yourselves from me than to reconfigure our relationship in a way that respected my contributions and needs." She winced at the bluntness of my assessment but didn't argue. "The attorney's letter said you contributed $75,000 to our down payment. Was that really meant as a loan?" "Yes, Allison. We discussed it explicitly. You and Derek were struggling to qualify for the mortgage amount you needed. I offered to help with the understanding that you would repay me when your careers were more established." "I honestly don't remember it that way," she said, but her expression betrayed uncertainty. "Why didn't you ever bring it up before now?" "Because you were building your careers, starting a family. Because I was living here and didn't need the money immediately. Because I trusted that when the time came, you would honor our agreement." I looked around the garage. I didn't anticipate the time coming quite like this. Allison stared at her hands. "I talked to Derek after dinner. He admitted he remembers something about repayment, but he thought it was just conversation, not a firm plan." It was a firm plan, Allison. I would never have given away nearly half of my liquid retirement savings without expectation of repayment. She nodded slowly. And the childcare and household management figures in the letter are actually quite conservative compared to market rates. I checked before authorizing Linda to include them. Silence fell between us, punctuated only by the sound of rain hitting the garage roof and the occasional car passing on the wet street outside. Finally, Allison spoke, her voice small. I think I've been unfair to you, Mom. I've taken your help for granted. We both have. It was an admission I had been waiting years to hear, but it brought no triumph, only a sad vindication. I appreciate you saying that, I replied gently. What do you want to happen now? She asked. Do you want to move back into the house? I considered the question. I want a living situation that affords me dignity and comfort. I want acknowledgement of my contributions, financial and otherwise. And I want a relationship with you, Derek, and especially live that isn't predicated on how useful I can be. She nodded, wiping away a tear. Those sound like reasonable wants. They are reasonable. That's part of why the garage situation was so hurtful. It suggested that you and Derek no longer considered me worthy of even basic comfort and respect. She looked around again, seeing the cot, the precarious stack of storage bins serving as a nightstand, the extension cord running across the floor to power the mini fridge and lamp. You're right. This isn't acceptable. I wouldn't put a houseguest here, let alone my mother. She stood up. Pack your things. You're moving back inside tonight. I shook my head. No, Allison. Not tonight, and not without a real plan. A moment of guilt or pity isn't enough to rebuild what's been broken. I need to know that you and Derek have really thought through what a fair arrangement looks like going forward. Her face fell. You don't trust me. I trust that you're sincere right now, but I need more than an emotional midnight decision. I need a thoughtful, considered plan that respects everyone's needs and boundaries. She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. That's fair. Derek and I will talk tomorrow and come up with something concrete. But at least let me bring you some more blankets. It's freezing in here. After she left and returned with an armload of warm bedding, we said goodnight. As the door closed behind her, I wrapped myself in the additional blankets, feeling a tentative hope. The conversation had been the most honest exchange Allison and I had shared in years. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices outside the garage door. Checking my phone, I saw it was just after 7:30 a.m. Liv should already be on her way to school. I quickly dressed and opened the door to find Derek and a man I didn't recognize examining the exterior of the garage. Good morning, I said cautiously. Derek turned, looking uncomfortable. Willa, this is Hector. He's a contractor. We're getting an estimate on what it would take to properly convert this space into a legal, comfortable apartment. I blinked, in surprise. I see. Hector nodded respectfully. Morning, ma'am. From what I can see so far, we'd need to add proper insulation, electrical upgrades for safe heating, plumbing for a real bathroom, sealing against water intrusion. It's a big job? Derek's expression was unreadable. How long would something like this take? Depending on permits and availability of materials, 6 to 8 weeks, minimum. Derek nodded, then turned to me. Allison and I talked this morning. We'd like you to move back into the guest room while we get this properly sorted out. I studied his face, looking for signs of resentment or manipulation, but saw only resigned acceptance. That's very thoughtful. It's not thoughtful, it's basic decency, which we should have demonstrated from the start. He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit I recognized from years of observing him. Willa, about the loan. I reviewed our old emails last night. You're right. We did explicitly discuss repayment. I chose to reframe it in my mind as a gift because it was easier than acknowledging another debt. The admission, clearly, difficult for him, softened something in me. Thank you for acknowledging that, Derek. We can't repay the full amount immediately, he continued, but we can start with a payment plan, and in the meantime, ensure you have proper living arrangements. That sounds reasonable, I said cautiously, still wary of sudden capitulation. There's something else. He glanced at Hector, who had wandered a few feet away to examine the garage foundation. Allison told me about your conversation last night. About feeling unvalued after everything you've done for our family. I waited, not making it easier for him. She was right, and you were right. We've taken advantage of your generosity and love for Liv. When things got more financially comfortable for us, we should have revisited our arrangement, compensated you properly, ensured you had your own security. Instead, we just continued accepting everything you gave. The admission, clearly painful for his pride, seemed genuine. What changed? I asked. Why the sudden insight? He gave a rueful smile. Honestly, two things. First, when I actually read the attorney's letter and saw the market value of what you've provided laid out in black and white, it was a wake-up call. And second, Liv came to me this morning before school and said, Dad, Grandma taught me that we have to fix our mistakes, not just say sorry. Out of the mouths of babes, right? Despite everything, I felt a swell of pride that Liv had absorbed those lessons about accountability. So what happens now? I asked. Now, you pack up your things and move back into the house while we work out a proper, written agreement, one that acknowledges your past contributions and establishes fair terms going forward. I nodded slowly. And Linda Chen? Because I'm not willing to proceed without legal guidance, Derek. Not anymore. He winced but nodded. That's your right. We'll work with her to draft something that protects everyone's interests. As I gathered my few belongings from the garage, I reflected on how quickly the situation had shifted. Just days ago, I had been silently accepting my banishment. Now, I was negotiating terms from a position of strength and self-advocacy. By mid-morning, I was resettled in the guest room. My room, as it had been for 12 years before the garage episode. The familiar comfort of a proper bed, an attached bathroom, and adequate heating felt like luxuries after my brief exile. Allison had taken the day off work, an unusual occurrence that signaled the seriousness with which she was now taking our situation. She knocked on my door around 11, carrying a tray with tea and scones, my favorite morning treat which I had often prepared for her. Mom, may I come in? I gestured to the small sitting area in the corner of the room. Of course. She set down the tray and sat across from me, her hands fidgeting in her lap. I called Linda Chen's office this morning. My eyebrows rose in surprise. Did you? Yes. I asked if we could schedule a mediation session, all of us, including you and your attorney, to work out a fair agreement that acknowledges everything you've done and ensures your future security. The initiative she had taken impressed me. That's a constructive approach, Allison. I also asked about the legal requirements for a proper in-law suite, if that's something you might want. She hesitated. I know we've damaged your trust, and you might prefer to live independently now. But if you did want to stay close to Liv, we could convert the garage properly, or even look at adding an extension to the house. I considered the offer. I'm not sure yet what arrangement would work best long-term, but I appreciate you considering options that would keep me close to Liv. She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I'm so sorry, Mom. When I think about you sleeping in that cold garage after everything you've done for us. She broke off, covering her face with her hands. I reached across and took her hand. Allison, what hurt most wasn't the physical discomfort. It was the clear message that my presence was no longer valued or desired, except in the most limited terms. That's not true, she protested, though weakly. Perhaps not consciously. But actions speak louder than words. And the action of moving me to the garage while you researched senior living facilities sent a very clear message. She winced. When you put it that way, it sounds awful. It felt awful, I said simply. 12 years of devotion to this family, and the return was exile to a space you wouldn't put a house guest. The blunt assessment made her flinch, but she didn't argue. What can we do to make it right? I sipped my tea, considering the question. We start with honesty and respect. We acknowledge what's happened and create a plan going forward that honors everyone's needs and contributions. And most importantly, we make sure Liv understands that families don't discard members when they become inconvenient, that care and respect are reciprocal, lifelong commitments. She nodded, wiping away tears. Those are good principles to rebuild on. They are. And they're the same principles I tried to teach you growing up, and that we've both tried to instill in Liv. A small smile broke through her tears. She's the one who really called us out, you know. This morning, she asked Derek why we thought it was okay to treat you like old furniture we didn't want anymore, but were too lazy to throw away. Her words, not mine. Despite everything, I laughed. She's perceptive, and not afraid to speak uncomfortable truths. Wonder where she gets that from, Allison said with a wry smile. The moment of connection felt like the first delicate shoot breaking through soil after a long winter, fragile, but alive with possibility. That afternoon, I received a call from Linda Chen. Mrs. Thorne, I've been contacted by your daughter about scheduling a mediation session. Yes, she mentioned she'd reached out to you. This is a positive development. Often, the simple act of receiving a formal legal letter is enough to prompt serious reflection and negotiation. Her voice was professional but carried a note of approval. How are you feeling about this turn of events? I considered the question. Cautiously optimistic. They've moved me back into the house while they explore options for proper long-term arrangements, and both have acknowledged, in different ways, that their treatment of me was unacceptable. That's excellent progress. Before we proceed with mediation, though, I'd like you to consider what your ideal outcome looks like. Not just financially, but in terms of your living situation and ongoing relationship with your family. The question caught me off guard. For so long, I had focused on others' needs and preferences that articulating my own ideal scenario felt almost transgressive. I need to think about that, I admitted. For years, I've defined myself primarily through my role in their lives. I'm not sure I know what I want independently of that. That's a common challenge for caregivers, Mrs. Thorne. Take some time to reflect on it before our mediation session. Remember, this isn't just about rectifying past injustices. It's about creating a future that honors your autonomy and needs. After hanging up, I sat by the window of my room, my proper room, with its soft bed and warm blankets, and gazed out at the garden I had tended for 12 years. The rose bushes needed pruning. The bird feeder was empty. Small tasks that had once been part of my daily routine, my contribution to the beauty and order of this home. What did I want, independently of my role as grandmother and caretaker? The question echoed in my mind, both liberating and terrifying. For the first time in years, perhaps even decades, I had the opportunity to shape my life according to my own desires rather than others' needs. I pulled out a notebook and began to write, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence. By the time I heard Liv's voice calling from downstairs, announcing her return from school, I had filled 3 pages with possibilities for my future, some practical, some fanciful, all authentically mine. Grandma? Liv appeared in the doorway, her face lighting up at the sight of me back in my proper room. You're inside again. I set aside my notebook and opened my arms. I am, indeed. She rushed to hug me. Dad said you're staying for real now, not in the garage. Did you and Mom and Dad fix things? We're working on it, I said honestly. These kinds of misunderstandings take time to sort out completely. She nodded sagely. Like when Casey and I had that big fight last year, and it took all semester to be real friends again. Exactly like that. But the important thing is that we're all trying our best to understand each other and make things right. She settled beside me on the window seat. Dad said we need to renegotiate our arrangement. What does that mean? I smiled at her precocious use of adult language. It means we're figuring out new ways to be a family that work for everyone. Sometimes when situations change, we need to make new agreements about how we live together. Like how I'm older now and don't need as much help with stuff. That's part of it. You're growing more independent, which means my role is changing too. She considered this. But you're still my grandma. That doesn't change, right? That will never change, sweetheart. No matter what else happens, I will always be your grandmother, and I will always love you. She leaned against me, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching a pair of cardinals at the empty bird feeder. After a moment, she said, I'm glad you called the attorney lady. Dad was really mad at first, but then he said sometimes people need a wake-up call. The simple wisdom in her observation made me smile. Your dad's right about that. Sometimes we all need help seeing situations clearly, especially when our emotions are involved. As the afternoon light slanted through the window, warming our faces, I felt a profound sense of peace. Not because everything was resolved, but because I had found my voice after years of silence. Whatever shape our family took moving forward, it would be one that included my needs and dignity alongside everyone else's. The garage episode, painful as it had been, had ultimately given me something invaluable: the courage to advocate for myself, to demand the respect I deserved, and to shape my future according to my own wishes. In standing up for my worth, I had also provided Liv with a powerful example, one I hoped would serve her well throughout her life. As we sat together watching the birds, I realized that this wasn't just about securing proper housing or financial compensation. It was about reclaiming my identity beyond the roles of mother and grandmother. It was about demonstrating to Liv, and to myself, that women of any age deserve dignity, respect, and the space to define their own lives. The path ahead might not be smooth, but for the first time in years, I was walking it on my own terms, with my head held high and my voice clear and strong. The woman who had taught generations of children to stand up for themselves had finally learned to stand up for herself. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all. The mediation session was scheduled for the following Friday at Linda Chen's office. The intervening days unfolded in a strange limbo. I was back in the house but acutely aware that our relationship had fundamentally changed. Derek and Allison were polite, even solicitous, but beneath the surface pleasantries ran currents of tension and uncertainty. We were all performing a delicate dance, unsure of the steps or the rhythm. I maintained my usual routines with Liv, preparing her breakfast and meeting her after school, but I deliberately stepped back from the household management that had been my domain for years. The laundry piled up. Dinner preparations fell to Allison, or more often, takeout containers. The subtle chaos that ensued was both vindicating and sad, proof of my value, yes, but also a reminder of how easily the fabric of family life can unravel. On Wednesday evening, as I sat in my room reviewing notes I'd prepared for the mediation session, a soft knock came at my door. Willa? Derek's voice. Do you have a minute? I set aside my papers. Come in. He entered, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. Derek Thompson had built his career on projecting unwavering confidence. Seeing him hesitant was like watching a different man entirely. I wanted to talk to you before Friday, he said, taking the chair across from me. Without lawyers or mediators. I waited, neither encouraging nor discouraging him. I've been doing a lot of thinking since we got that letter. He ran a hand through his hair. At first, I was angry. It felt like a betrayal, bringing legal action against family. It wasn't litigation, Derek. It was advocacy. He nodded. I understand that now. The thing is, when I saw those figures, what you've contributed financially, what your services would have cost us at market rates, it forced me to confront how much we've taken from you. His admission surprised me. Derek had always been skilled at justifying his actions, framing everything in terms that cast him in the most favorable light. The worst part, he continued, is that I think I knew it all along. I knew we were getting the better end of the deal. I just didn't want to examine it too closely because it was convenient. Why are you telling me this now? Because I want you to know that I understand why you did what you did, and I don't blame you for it. He met my eyes directly. I also want you to know that whatever agreement we reach on Friday, I'm committed to honoring it. Not just the letter, but the spirit. I regarded him skeptically. That's a significant shift, Derek. It is. He smiled ruefully. Turns out, having your mother-in-law's attorney outline exactly how you've exploited her labor for a decade is quite the wake-up call. Despite everything, I found myself smiling. I imagine it would be. His expression sobered. There's something else. When we were first married, before Liv, Allison and I struggled. You know that. What you may not know is how close we came to divorcing. This was news to me. I had no idea. We kept it private. But the point is, when you offered to help us with childcare, it wasn't just about the practicalities. It saved our marriage in a lot of ways. We were able to focus on our careers, yes, but also on rebuilding our relationship without the stress of balancing work and childcare. I processed this revelation, seeing the past 12 years in a slightly different light. I'm glad I could help in that way, even unknowingly. You did more than help, Willa. You gave us the foundation to build the life we have now. He leaned forward, which makes our recent treatment of you even more inexcusable. The conversation left me with mixed emotions. Derek's recognition of his behavior was gratifying, but it also highlighted how blind they had been to my needs and contributions for so long. It took the threat of legal action to prompt this insight, a fact that said much about the true nature of our relationship. That night, I called Barbara to update her on the developments. So they've done a complete turnaround? Her skepticism came through clearly. Just like that? Not completely, and not just like that. The attorney's letter made a significant impact. And I think seeing me actually stand up for myself shocked them. Good. It's about time they realize they can't just discard you when it's convenient. Barb had always been more outspoken than me, quicker to confront injustice. What are you hoping to get out of the mediation? I considered the question. Financial security, obviously. Recognition of my contributions. And a relationship with Liv that doesn't depend on me providing free labor. And what about living arrangements? Are you planning to stay with them? I'm not sure yet. That's one of the things we'll discuss Friday. After hanging up, I returned to my notes, adding insights from my conversation with Derek. Linda had advised me to be clear about my priorities going into mediation, to know which points were non-negotiable and where I was willing to compromise. The financial aspects were straightforward: repayment of the loan with reasonable interest and compensation for years of childcare and household management. But the living arrangements and ongoing relationship were more complex. Did I want to remain in this house, in a properly converted space? Did I want my own place nearby? Or did I want to start fresh somewhere else entirely, perhaps near Barbara in Pine Valley? Each option had merits and drawbacks. Staying meant proximity to Liv, but also the risk of falling back into old patterns. Moving nearby would provide independence while maintaining regular contact. Moving to Pine Valley would mean distance from Liv, but the support of my sister and a fresh start in a community where I could define myself beyond my role as grandmother. the question that kept surfacing was, who am I outside of this family? Who could I be if I prioritized my own desires? After decades of prioritizing others? Friday morning dawned clear and crisp. I dressed with care in a navy suit I had worn to parent-teacher conferences, professional but not severe. As I applied a touch of lipstick, I studied my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had changed in subtle but significant ways over the past weeks. There was a clarity in her eyes, a firmness around her mouth. She looked like someone who knew her own worth. Derek and Allison were waiting downstairs, both dressed as if for important business meetings. The drive to Linda's office was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we passed familiar landmarks, the park where I had pushed Liv on swings, the library where we'd spent rainy afternoons, I felt a pang of nostalgia mingled with determination. Whatever happened today would shape the next chapter of all our lives. Linda Chen's office occupied the third floor of a handsome brick building downtown. Her assistant showed us into a conference room where Linda was already waiting, along with another attorney I presumed was representing Derek and Allison. "Mrs. Thorne, good to see you," Linda said, rising to shake my hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, thank you for coming. This is Martin Reeves, who I understand is advising you today." We exchanged pleasantries and took our seats around the polished conference table. The formality of the setting emphasized the gravity of what we were undertaking, transforming unspoken family dynamics into explicit legal agreements. "Before we begin," Linda said, "I want to clarify that our goal today is to reach an amicable resolution that acknowledges past contributions and establishes fair terms moving forward. This isn't adversarial. It's about creating clarity and fairness for everyone." Martin Reeves nodded. "My clients share that goal. They've expressed a sincere desire to address Mrs. Thorne's concerns and establish a more equitable arrangement." Linda opened a folder. "Excellent. Let's start with the financial aspects, which are the most straightforward. Mrs. Thorne contributed $75,000 toward the down payment on the Thompsons' home, with the understanding that this was a loan to be repaid. We have documentation confirming this understanding, including emails referencing repayment." Martin glanced at Derek and Allison. "My clients acknowledge this loan and are prepared to repay it with reasonable interest. We propose a payment plan of $500 monthly until the full amount plus 3% annual interest is satisfied." I raised an eyebrow at the relatively low monthly payment, but before I could speak, Linda interjected. "Given the timeline, 12 years, without any repayment, and the financial position of the Thompsons, we would expect a more substantial monthly amount. Perhaps $3,000, with a reasonable down payment to acknowledge the extended delay." Derek leaned forward. "We can do $2,500 monthly, with a $10,000 initial payment next week." Linda looked to me for approval. I nodded, and she made a note. "Next, the matter of compensation for services rendered," she continued. "Mrs. Thorne has provided full-time childcare, household management, and other support services for 12 years. The market value of these services is substantial." Martin cleared his throat. "My clients recognize the significant value Mrs. Thorne has provided. However, they note that she received room and board during this period, which offsets some of the value." I felt a flare of indignation, but Linda was already responding. "Basic room and board hardly compensates for what amounts to a full-time, live-in nanny, housekeeper, and cook. The fair market value of Mrs. Thorne's services, even after accounting for room and board, exceeds $300,000. We're willing to accept $200,000 in recognition of the family relationship, payable in installments if necessary." Derek and Allison exchanged glances. "That's a significant amount," Derek said carefully. "It's actually quite reasonable," Linda countered. "If you had hired these services professionally, you would have paid substantially more. Mrs. That would be wonderful," I agreed. "She can have her own key to use on our scheduled days." The process of separating my belongings from the Thompsons' household revealed how thoroughly our lives had intertwined over the years. Kitchen gadgets I had purchased for making Liv's favorite foods, books we had read together, photo albums documenting family vacations. Each item required a decision: keep, leave, store. Liv observed these preparations with a mixture of curiosity and concern. One afternoon, as I was sorting through a box of teaching materials I had used to help with her early reading, she perched on the edge of my bed. "Grandma, are you sure you want to leave? Dad said they could make the garage really nice for you." I set aside the phonics cards and sat beside her. "The garage apartment would have been lovely, sweetheart, but I think it's time for me to have my own space again, just like you'll want your own space when you grow up." She considered this. "But you'll still see me, right? Like, a lot?" "Absolutely. We have our schedule all worked out. Sunday dinners, Wednesday afternoons, and I'll be at all your performances and games. Plus, you can call me anytime you want." I brushed a strand of hair from her face. "And you'll have your own key to my apartment to use on our days together." This detail pleased her enormously. "My own key? Really? Really? You're old enough for that responsibility." Her chest puffed with pride. "I won't lose it. I promise." As my moving day approached, I found myself reflecting on the strange journey that had led to this moment. The hurt of being relegated to the garage had transformed into a catalyst for reclaiming my independence and dignity. The legal confrontation, painful as it was, had cleared the air and created a framework for honest relationship. What had begun as rejection had become, improbably, a doorway to a new chapter. The night before I moved, Derek knocked on my bedroom door. "Got a minute, Willa?" I waved him in, curious about what prompted this final private conversation. "I wanted to give you something," he said, holding out an envelope. "It's not part of our agreement. It's something else." I opened the envelope to find a certificate for a series of art classes at the community college near my new apartment. I looked at him questioningly. "I remember you mentioning once, years ago, that you'd always wanted to learn to paint," he explained. "But you never had time because you were always taking care of everyone else." The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. Derek, who had always seemed oblivious to my personal desires, had remembered this small dream I had mentioned in passing. "Thank you, Derek. This is very thoughtful." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's the least I could do, and I hope you know that despite everything, I do value what you've given this family. Not just the practical help, but the love and stability." The acknowledgement so long in coming warmed something in me. "I appreciate that, and I hope you know that despite our difficulties, I've always valued you as Liv's father and Allison's husband." He nodded, and for a moment, we sat in a silence that felt, for the first time in months, comfortable rather than strained. Moving day dawned bright and clear. Derek and Allison had hired professional movers, insisting on covering the expense as a gesture of goodwill. As the last boxes were loaded onto the truck, I stood in what had been my bedroom for 12 years, now stripped of my personal touches. Allison appeared in the doorway. "Ready, Mom?" I nodded, looking around one last time. "It feels strange, leaving this way." "I know." She hesitated, then added, "But it's not really goodbye. It's just a change." "A necessary one," I agreed. Downstairs, Liv was waiting, clutching a small wrapped package. "Grandma, I made you something for your new place." I unwrapped it to find a hand-painted ceramic dish, clearly a recent art project. "For your keys and stuff," she explained proudly. "So you don't lose them." "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'll use it every day." The drive to my new apartment was short but significant, a journey from one chapter to another. As we unpacked the essentials and arranged the furniture, I began to see how this space could become mine in a way the Thompson house never truly had been. Here, I could arrange things according to my preferences without considering anyone else's convenience. Here, I could develop routines based on my own rhythms rather than the family's needs. After the movers left and the major pieces were in place, Allison, Derek, and Liv prepared to leave as well. "We'll let you settle in," Allison said, "but we'll see you Sunday for dinner, right?" "I wouldn't miss it," I assured her. Liv lingered, reluctant to leave. "Can I stay and help Grandma unpack?" "Not today, honey," Derek said gently. "Grandma needs some time to organize her new home. But you'll see her Wednesday after school, remember?" After final hugs and promises to call if I needed anything, they departed, leaving me alone in my new apartment. The silence was profound. No dishwasher humming, no television murmuring from another room, no footsteps overhead, just quiet, and the faint sounds of birds outside my window. I made a cup of tea and sat in my new armchair, surveying my domain. The apartment was small but well-designed, with large windows that filled the space with natural light. The living room opened to a small dining area and efficient kitchen. The bedroom was cozy rather than cramped, with enough space for a comfortable bed and reading chair. It was, I realized, the first space that had been entirely mine since Robert died 15 years ago. The thought of my late husband brought unexpected tears. What would he think of all this? The garage incident, the legal confrontation, this new beginning? He had always encouraged me to stand up for myself, even as I was more naturally inclined to smooth things over and keep peace. "You'd be proud, Robert," I whispered to the empty room. It took me long enough, but I finally did. As I unpacked over the next few days, arranging books on shelves and hanging pictures on walls, I felt my identity expanding beyond the narrow confines of grandmother and mother-in-law. I was Wilhelmina Thorne again, Willa, with interests, and routines all my own. I enrolled in the art class Derek had gifted me, discovering a latent talent for watercolor landscapes. I joined the community garden at my complex, claiming a small plot where I planned to grow herbs and flowers. I reconnected with former teaching colleagues, meeting for coffee and reminiscing about our years in the classroom. Wednesday arrived, and with it, Liv's first visit to my new apartment. She bounded in after school, eager to explore every corner and help arrange the few remaining unpacked items. "This is so cool, Grandma," she declared, spinning in the center of the living room. "It's like a mini house just for you." "That's exactly what it is," I agreed, setting out the snack I had prepared. Apple slices with peanut butter, her favorite since toddlerhood. "And I can come here whenever I want?" "On our scheduled days? Yes. And other times if your parents agree and I'm available." She plopped onto the sofa, munching an apple slice. "I like having two homes now, yours and Mom and Dad's." The simple statement touched me deeply. Despite the upheaval and tension, Liv still saw me as a constant in her life, a source of stability and love. As we settled into a routine of Wednesday, visits and Sunday dinners, my relationship with Allison and Derek gradually evolved. The formal agreements we had reached in mediation provided a framework, but within that structure, new patterns emerged. They began to treat me more as an independent adult with my own life, rather than an auxiliary member of their household. I, in turn, found myself less enmeshed in their daily choices and more focused on my direct relationship with Liv. One Sunday evening, about 2 months after my move, Allison walked me to my car after dinner. "Mom, I've been meaning to tell you something," she said, hesitating slightly. "The whole garage situation, it was mainly Derek's idea, but I went along with it. I should have stood up for you, and I didn't. I was so caught up in what was convenient for us that I lost sight of what was right." The admission, clearly difficult for her, deserved acknowledgement. "Thank you for saying that, Allison. It matters to hear it." "I've been thinking a lot about the example I set for Liv and how I treat you. What does it teach her about valuing people, especially older women? About respecting those who care for us? She shook her head. It's not the lesson I want her to learn. It's never too late to teach a better one, I said gently. She nodded, blinking back tears. I'm trying. As I drove home that evening, I reflected on how far we had come from the day I found myself standing in a cold garage with my suitcase, stunned by the sudden relegation to the margins of family life. The journey from that moment to this one had been painful but ultimately transformative. Not just for me, but for all of us. The garage incident, as I now thought of it, had forced a long overdue reckoning. It had compelled us to articulate unspoken expectations, to acknowledge the value of care work often rendered invisible, to recognize the humanity and dignity of aging family members. Through the pain of confrontation and the careful work of rebuilding, we had created something more honest, more equitable, and ultimately more loving than what had existed before. Arriving at my apartment, I used the ceramic dish Liv had made to hold my keys as I set them down, a small ritual that had come to symbolize my new independence. Through the window, I could see the community garden where my herbs were beginning to sprout. On the easel in the corner stood my latest watercolor attempt, a landscape of the lake where Robert and I had spent our summers. This space was mine, not a concession granted by others, but a place I had claimed and shaped according to my own desires. The fear I had initially felt about living alone had transformed into appreciation for the quiet rhythms of solitude, the freedom to arrange my days according to my own needs and interests. That night, as I prepared for bed in my peaceful apartment, I reflected on the strange alchemy that had transformed humiliation into empowerment, rejection into self-discovery. By standing up for my worth, financially, emotionally, practically, I had reclaimed not just material security, but something far more precious, my sense of self beyond the roles of mother and grandmother. The garage that was meant to contain and diminish me had instead become the catalyst for my liberation. The one phone call to my attorney had set in motion a journey I could never have anticipated, from the shadows of others' lives into the clear light of my own. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt gratitude for the painful awakening that had led to this new beginning. Sometimes I reflected, we must lose what we thought we wanted to discover what we truly need. Sometimes, we must stand at the edge of rejection to find the courage to claim our own worth. And sometimes, a simple fold-out cot in a cold garage can become the unlikely doorway to a richer, more authentic life than we ever imagined possible. 6 months into my new life, spring arrived with an explosion of color. The community garden at my apartment complex transformed from bare soil to lush greenery, and my own little plot flourished with herbs and flowers. My watercolor skills had progressed from awkward washes to recognizable landscapes, several of which now adorned my apartment walls. The rhythm of my days, art classes on Mondays, garden committee on Thursdays, Live on Wednesdays and Sundays, provided a framework of purpose and pleasure I hadn't experienced in decades. The financial arrangements with Allison and Derek had proceeded smoothly. Each month, their payments arrived on schedule, gradually building my savings and security. The mediation agreement had held firm, with both sides honoring not just the letter, but the spirit of our understanding. Our interactions had evolved from the initial awkwardness to a new kind of relationship, more balanced, more honest, and in some ways more genuinely affectionate than before. One Wednesday afternoon, in April, Liv burst into my apartment with unusual excitement. "Grandma, guess what? I got the lead in the spring musical." I looked up from the book I'd been reading, delighted by her news. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Tell me everything." She dropped her backpack and flung herself onto the sofa beside me. "It's called The Garden of Dreams, and I play the dreamer, the main character who has to save the garden from the Frost King. There's singing and dancing and everything." "When are the performances?" I asked, already mentally clearing my calendar. 2 weeks, from Friday and Saturday. Ms. Kennedy says we need to practice a lot because there's not much time. Her face clouded slightly. Mom and Dad say they'll come, but they might be late because of some work thing. I heard the disappointment beneath her casual tone. Well, I'll be there for both performances, front and center, and I'll help you. Practice your lines and songs whenever you want. Her smile returned. Really? That would be great. There's a lot to memorize. That evening, when Allison came to pick up Liv, I mentioned the musical. She's so excited about her role. Will you and Derek really have trouble making it to the performances? Allison sighed, lowering her voice so Liv wouldn't hear from where she was gathering her things. Derek has this client dinner that's been on the books for months. I told him we should reschedule, but he says it's crucial for landing a major account. I might still make it for the second half, but... She trailed off, looking genuinely torn. Being a working mother meant constant, impossible choices. I understood that better than most. Still, I couldn't help feeling a pang for Liv, who would scan the audience for parents who might not be there. What if I record it? I suggested. That way, even if you miss parts, you can watch the whole thing together later. Allison's face brightened. That would be perfect. Thank you, Mom. As she and Liv departed, I reflected on how our relationship had evolved. 6 months ago, such a conversation would have been fraught with tension. My suggestion might have been interpreted as criticism, her absence as evidence of prioritizing work over family. Now, we could navigate these waters more smoothly, acknowledging the realities and limitations of our different roles without judgment or defensiveness. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm of rehearsals and practice sessions. Liv would come to my apartment after school, and we'd work through her lines, songs, and choreography. I'd hold up cue cards, play the piano accompaniment on a small keyboard I'd purchased specifically for this purpose, and offer encouragement when she stumbled. Watching her blossom in this role, gaining confidence, finding her voice, filled me with a pride so intense it bordered on pain. 3 days before the performance, as Liv was practicing her final monologue, my phone rang. It was Barbara. Willa, are you sitting down? My heart skipped. Those words never preceded good news. What's happened? It's nothing dire. Don't panic. But I did something a bit impulsive, and I'm hoping you'll approve. Knowing my sister, impulsive could encompass a wide range of actions, from adopting a stray cat to buying a motorcycle. Go on. I sold the flower shop. This wasn't what I'd expected. Barbara had built that business from nothing, nurturing it for nearly 20 years. What? Why? A larger company made an offer I couldn't refuse. They want to keep the shop as is but expand the greenhouse operation. I'll stay on as a consultant for the transition, but after that... She paused dramatically. I'm free. Free to do what exactly? That's the part I'm hoping you'll approve. Her voice bubbled with excitement. I've bought an RV, not one of those massive things, a compact model, just right for 1 or 2 people, and I'm planning a cross-country trip starting next month. The question is, will you come with me? The invitation hit me like a gust of unexpected wind. Barbara, I can't just leave. Why not? You're not tethered to that family anymore. You have your own place, your own money. Liv is growing more independent every day. What's stopping you from having an adventure? What indeed? The question resonated more deeply than I cared to admit. Since establishing my independence, I had created a comfortable routine. But was it becoming just another form of constraint? Was I defining myself too narrowly by my proximity to Allison and Liv? I'd need to think about it, I said cautiously. There's Liv's musical coming up, and our visitation schedule, and... Willa, Barbara interrupted gently. Those are logistics, not reasons. Just promise me you'll give it real thought, okay? This could be the adventure of a lifetime for both of us. After hanging up, I sat staring at the wall, Barbara's invitation echoing in my mind. An RV trip across the country, something I'd never even considered. The idea was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. At 65, was I too old for such adventures? Or was I exactly the right age to seize opportunities that might never come again? The next morning, over coffee, with Eleanor, one of my neighbors in the apartment complex, I mentioned Barbara's proposal. "You should absolutely go," Eleanor said without hesitation. "I did something similar after Howard died. Took a cruise to Alaska by myself. Everyone thought I was crazy, especially my children. Mom, what if something happens to you?" As if something couldn't happen to me sitting alone in my living room. I laughed, appreciating her perspective. "But what about my granddaughter? We have this whole schedule worked out." Eleanor fixed me with a knowing look. "Honey, schedules can be adjusted. And a grandmother who comes back with stories of adventure sets a powerful example for a young girl." Her words stayed with me throughout the day as I prepared for Liv's dress rehearsal. Would my absence truly harm her, or might it teach her something valuable about embracing life's opportunities? Was my hesitation about her needs or my own fears? That evening, as I watched Liv on stage, confident, radiant, fully inhabiting her role, I felt a surge of emotion so complex I could hardly name it. Pride, yes, but also a wistful recognition that she was growing into her own person, separate from me. My role in her life would inevitably change as she matured. Perhaps part of loving her well meant showing her how to live fully at every stage of life. After the rehearsal, as we walked to meet Allison in the parking lot, Liv chattered excitedly about the performance. "Did you see when Tyler almost forgot his line? And when Emma's crown fell off? Ms. Kennedy says those things happen in live theater, and we just have to keep going." "You were magnificent," I assured her. "So poised, even when things went a little sideways." She beamed at the praise. Then, unexpectedly, she asked, "Grandma, were you ever in a play when you were my age?" "Once," I recalled. "I played a tree in our 4th grade production, not exactly a starring role." "Did your mom come to see you?" The question caught me off guard. My mother had been a practical woman, too busy with work and caring for my ailing father to attend many school functions. No, she couldn't make it. She was taking care of my father, who was sick at the time. Liv nodded thoughtfully. "That's sad, but I bet she would have come if she could, right?" "I'm sure she would have," I agreed, though the truth was more complicated. My mother had belonged to a generation of women who viewed childhood performances as frivolities, not priorities. She had loved me in her way, but not through the kind of active presence and engagement I had tried to provide for both Allison and Liv. This generational evolution struck me suddenly. How each generation of women in our family had expanded their definition of mothering, of grandmothering. My mother had provided the essentials. I had added emotional support and presence. Allison, for all her career focus, brought a more conscious intentionality to parenting than I had managed. What legacy, I wondered, was I leaving for Liv? What example of womanhood in its later chapters? As we reached Allison's car, these thoughts still swirled in my mind. "Mom, you look deep in thought," Allison observed as Liv climbed into the back seat. "Just reflecting on generations," I said vaguely. "Allison, can we have coffee tomorrow? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." She looked surprised but nodded. "Sure. The usual place at 10? The next morning, we met at the small cafe halfway between our homes, neutral territory that had become our preferred meeting spot for one-on-one conversations. After ordering our drinks and finding a quiet corner table, I took a deep breath and shared Barbara's invitation. "An RV trip? Across the country?" Allison looked stunned. "For how long?" "That's part of what's undefined. Barbara's thinking Several months at least. She wants to see the national parks, visit friends scattered around different states, maybe even make it up to Alaska if weather permits. Allison stirred her coffee, processing. What about your apartment, your art classes, your garden plot? All logistics that could be managed, I said, echoing Barbara's assessment. The real question is about my role in your lives. In Liv's life particularly. We have our schedule, our routines. Would it be disruptive for me to be gone for an extended period? She studied me for a long moment. Mom, are you asking my permission? The question startled me. No, not exactly. I'm considering how my choices affect others. The way Derek and I considered how our choices affected you when we moved you to the garage. Her tone wasn't accusatory, but reflective. That worked out badly for everyone. I acknowledged the point with a nod. True, but this is different. Liv is at a formative age. Our relationship is important to her. It is, Allison agreed. But so is seeing her grandmother embrace life fully, follow her own dreams. She reached across the table to take my hand. Mom, if you want to go on this adventure with Aunt Barbara, you should go. We'll figure out the logistics. Maybe Liv can FaceTime with you from different places along your route, a virtual geography lesson. And who knows? Maybe we could even fly out to meet you somewhere along the way for a mini vacation. Her supportive response moved me deeply. 6 months ago, such a conversation would have been unimaginable. Me considering an extended absence. Her facilitating rather than resisting it. We had come so far from the days of unspoken expectations and inequitable sacrifices. Thank you, Allison. That means a lot to me. She squeezed my hand before releasing it. Just promise me one thing. You'll wait until after Liv's musical to make any decisions. She's so excited about you being there. Absolutely. I wouldn't miss it for the world. The night of Liv's opening performance arrived with all the nervous energy and excitement such occasions generate. I arrived early, securing a seat in the front row, my camera ready to record. The elementary school auditorium filled quickly with parents, siblings, and grandparents, all armed with flowers and proud smiles. To my surprise, Derek slid into the seat beside me just as the lights began to dim. Didn't think I'd make it, he whispered. Rescheduled the client dinner. Some things are more important. The simple statement, so at odds with the priorities he had demonstrated for years, caught me off guard. Before I could respond, the curtain rose and Liv appeared, center stage, her face alight with the magic of performance. For the next hour, I was transported, not just by the charming if somewhat chaotic elementary school production, but by the sight of my granddaughter fully in her element. She sang with clear confidence, delivered her lines with perfect timing, and moved across the stage with a grace that belied her 10 years. When she delivered her final monologue about the power of dreams to transform reality, I felt tears spring to my eyes. Beside me, Derek was similarly affected, discreetly wiping his eyes as the audience burst into applause. When Liv took her bow, beaming with accomplishment, he leaned over to me. She's amazing. Thank you for helping her prepare. She did all the hard work, I demurred. I just provided an audience. After the performance, as parents and children milled about in the lobby, Liv ran to us, still in her costume, her face flushed with excitement. Did you see? Did you watch the whole thing? Every magical moment, I assured her, presenting the bouquet of flowers I had brought. You were absolutely wonderful. Derek knelt to her level. Superstar performance, Liv. I'm so proud of you. She looked at him in surprise. You came? But what about your important dinner? Nothing's more important than seeing my daughter shine, he said simply. As we walked to the car together, a family unit reconfigured but intact, I felt a deep contentment. The past 6 months had transformed us all in ways both subtle and profound. Derek, once so focused on career advancement that family events were secondary, had reprioritized. Allison had developed a new appreciation for the value of care work. Liv was blossoming in the security of knowing she was genuinely seen and valued by the adults in her life. And I had reclaimed my identity beyond the narrow confines of helpful grandmother. The following Sunday, as we gathered for our regular dinner, I formally announced my decision to join Barbara on the RV adventure. "We'll start in early June," I explained, showing them the rough itinerary Barbara had sketched out, beginning with the Southwest, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce, then working our way up through the Rockies toward Yellowstone. Liv's eyes widened as she traced the route on the map. "You're going to see all these places? For real?" "That's the plan," I confirmed. "And I'll send you postcards from everywhere we stop. Plus, we can video chat so you can see some of these amazing places virtually." "Can I come visit you somewhere?" she asked eagerly. "Like, could we meet you at one of the cool places?" I glanced at Allison and Derek. "That's something for your parents to decide, but I'd love it if you could." Derek nodded thoughtfully. "We could probably arrange something during summer break. Maybe meet you at Yellowstone or Glacier." The casual way he incorporated my adventure into family planning, treating it as an opportunity rather than an inconvenience, confirmed how far we had come from the days when my needs were subordinate to everyone else's convenience. As dinner progressed, we discussed practical arrangements, how to handle my apartment during my absence, how to maintain our connection across distance, how to adjust our visitation schedule upon my return. The conversation flowed with a mutual respect and consideration that would have seemed impossible in the wake of the garage incident. After dinner, as Liv helped clear the table, Allison pulled me aside. "Mom, I've been meaning to tell you something. Watching you these past 6 months, seeing how you've rebuilt your life on your own terms, it's been inspiring. Not just for Liv, but for me too." Her words touched me deeply. "How so?" "You've shown me that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to claim your own happiness, and that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself completely." She smiled ruefully. "These are lessons I hope to apply better than I have in the past." The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparation. Barbara arrived with her compact RV, a 20-foot model she had named Liberty, and we set about planning our route in greater detail, gathering supplies, and making arrangements for my apartment. I sublet it to Eleanor's niece, who needed a temporary place while her own home was being renovated, ensuring the space wouldn't sit empty and my plants would be tended. The garden committee graciously reassigned my plot to a family on the waiting list, with the understanding that I'd be welcome to take another upon my return. My art instructor suggested I bring sketching materials to document our journey, perhaps creating a travel journal of watercolors to preserve our experiences. Through it all, Liv remained my enthusiastic supporter, helping to research interesting sites along our planned route, and creating a special journal where I could record adventures to share with her later. "Make sure you take lots of pictures of animals," she instructed seriously, "especially bears and wolves, but not too close because they're dangerous." "Safety first," I assured her, touched by her concern. "No close encounters with wildlife." The evening before our departure, we gathered one last time at Allison and Derek's house. They had organized a small send-off party, complete with a cake decorated to look like an RV and a gift, a high-quality digital camera for documenting every adventure. As the evening wound down, Liv presented me with her own gift, a carefully crafted bracelet of colored beads. "I made it in art class," she explained. "Each color means something. Blue is for the sky, you'll see, green for the forests, red for the rocks in the Grand Canyon." I slipped it onto my wrist, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness behind it. "I'll wear it every day, sweetheart, and whenever I look at it, I'll think of you." Later, as Barbara and I prepared to leave, Derek surprised me with an envelope. "A little something extra for the trip," he said. From both of us. Inside was a generous gift card for gas and supplies, along with a handwritten note. Thank you for teaching us the true meaning of family. Safe travels and swift return. With love, Derek and Allison. The simple acknowledgement, free from the defensiveness or resentment that had once characterized our relationship, signaled how profoundly things had changed since that fateful day in the garage. As we drove away, I glanced back at the house where I had spent 12 years. Place that had been simultaneously my home and not my home, the site of both my deepest belonging and my most painful rejection. The garage, now empty of both my presence and its symbolic weight, was just a structure again, no longer a representation of my marginalization, but merely a place where a family once learned hard lessons about value, dignity, and respect. Barbara, sensing my reflective mood, reached over to squeeze my hand. "Penny for your thoughts, sis." "I was just thinking about journeys," I said. "How the ones that begin with the greatest pain sometimes lead to the most profound transformation." She nodded, understanding immediately what I was referencing. From the garage to the open road, not a trajectory anyone could have predicted. "No," I agreed, "but perhaps exactly the one I needed." Early the next morning, with Liberty fully packed and our route mapped out, we prepared for departure. I stood in the parking lot of my apartment complex, taking one last look at the place that had been my first step toward independence. Barbara was inside the RV, doing a final check of our supplies and systems, giving me a moment alone with my thoughts. My phone chimed with a text from Allison. "Safe travels, Mom. We love you and will miss you. Remember, this isn't goodbye, just see you later. Call when you can." The simple message, warm and supportive without a hint of the guilt or manipulation that might once have accompanied such a parting, filled me with gratitude for how far we had all come. As I climbed into the passenger seat of Liberty, Barbara turned to me with a grin. "Ready for the adventure of a lifetime, Willa?" Was I ready? To explore landscapes I'd only seen in photographs? To meet new people with stories unlike my own? To discover aspects of myself that had lain dormant during decades of caregiving? To write a new chapter in a life I had once thought already fully drafted? "More than ready," I replied, returning her smile. "Let's go." As Liberty pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. The past, with all its pain, its joy, its lessons, remained where it belonged. Ahead lay open roads, vast horizons, and the exhilarating uncertainty of a future I was finally free to shape according to my own desires. The garage that had been meant as my endpoint had instead become a beginning, the unlikely doorway to a life richer and more authentic than I could have imagined. As we merged onto the highway, heading west toward mountains and deserts and experiences yet unnamed, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for that painful awakening. Sometimes rejection becomes redirection. Sometimes what seems like an ending is merely the first step on a journey you never knew you were meant to take. And sometimes, a single phone call to an attorney can set in motion a transformation that ripples outward, changing not just your own life, but the lives of everyone connected to you. The sun rose higher in the eastern sky as we drove west, its warm light filling Liberty's cabin. On my wrist, Leave's beaded bracelet caught the sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the dashboard. Ahead, the highway stretched toward the horizon, not an escape route, but a path forward into a future full of possibility. One phone call had changed everything. One moment of courage had led to thousands more. One decision to value myself had opened doors I never knew existed. As the city receded behind us and open country unfolded ahead, I felt the last lingering shadows of the garage incident fall away, replaced by the brightness of anticipation and the quiet certainty that at 65, my most meaningful journey was just beginning. A year had passed since Barbara and I had embarked on our cross-country adventure in Liberty. What had begun as a tentative step into the unknown had blossomed into a transformative journey neither of us could have anticipated. We'd traversed 26 states, from the sun-scorched mesas of Arizona to the misty coastlines of Maine. We'd slept beneath star-filled skies in remote campgrounds and parked in the driveways of newfound friends. We'd hiked through ancient forests, waded in two oceans, and gathered stories like precious souvenirs. The RV trip that was meant to last a few months had extended as we discovered a shared appetite for exploration and a capacity for reinvention that surprised us both. Now, as autumn painted the landscape in amber and crimson, we were finally heading home, changed in ways both subtle and profound. "Hard to believe we're almost back," Barbara remarked as she navigated Liberty along the familiar interstate that would lead us to Lakeside Heights. "Remember how nervous you were when we first set out?" I laughed, recalling my initial trepidation. I was certain I'd be homesick within a week. Instead, you became the adventure junkie," she finished with a grin. "Who was it that insisted we try whitewater rafting in Colorado?" "That was a calculated risk," I protested mildly. "The guide said it was perfect for beginners." "The guide was a 20-year-old adrenaline addict who thought anyone over 60 needed to seize life by the throat," Barbara countered. But I'll admit, that was one of the highlights. It had been, indeed. The memory of cold spray on my face, the exhilaration of navigating the churning rapids, the triumphant exhaustion afterward. These were sensations I never would have experienced if I'd remained within the comfortable confines of my former life. As Liberty crossed the state line, my thoughts turned increasingly toward the reunion ahead. I'd maintained regular contact with Allison, Derek, and especially Liv throughout our journey. Video calls from scenic overlooks, virtual tours of national monuments, bedtime stories read across thousands of miles. They'd even joined us for a week in Yellowstone as planned, where Liv had embraced the adventure with characteristic enthusiasm, filling 3 disposable cameras with wildlife photos. But digital connections and a brief vacation were different from the day-to-day reality of being present in each other's lives. How would we all navigate the shift back to proximity? Had our time apart changed the dynamics we'd so carefully reconstructed after the garage incident? "You're quiet," Barbara observed, glancing at me. "Nervous about going back?" "Not nervous exactly, just contemplative. So much has changed in the past year. In me, especially. I'm not the same person who left. That's generally the point of journeys," she said with the gentle wisdom that had guided us through many challenging moments on the road. "The question is, what will you do with all you've discovered about yourself?" It was the central question, indeed. The journey had awakened capacities I'd forgotten I possessed: resilience, adaptability, curiosity, joy in the unexpected. I'd rediscovered old passions and uncovered new ones. Landscape photography, stargazing, writing short stories inspired by our travels. I'd met dozens of remarkable women my age and older who were crafting rich, purposeful lives beyond traditional notions of grandmotherhood. Most importantly, I'd developed a deeper relationship with myself, learning to listen to my own desires, honor my own boundaries, and value my own company in a way that had eluded me for decades. The woman returning to Lakeside Heights was both familiar and fundamentally transformed, like a melody played in a different key. As we approached the city limits, my phone chimed with a text from Allison. "Just a heads up. We've planned a small welcome home gathering. Hope that's okay. Nothing fancy. Just family and a few neighbors who've missed you." I smiled at her consideration in warning me. The old Allison might have surprised me with such a gathering, assuming I'd be delighted without checking. The new Allison recognized my potential need to prepare mentally after months of relative solitude. "Looks like we're headed straight to a party," I told Barbara, showing her the text. "Perfect. I'm dying for some real food that doesn't come from Liberty's tiny refrigerator." We arrived at Allison and Derek's house in the golden light of late afternoon. The driveway was lined with cars, and balloons tied to the mailbox fluttered in the autumn breeze. Before we could even exit the RV, the front door flew open, and Liv came racing down the path, her legs longer than I remembered, her face alight with joy. "Grandma! Aunt Barb! You're finally home!" She flung herself into my arms the moment I stepped onto the driveway, nearly knocking me off balance. At 11, she was in that magical space between childhood and adolescence, still eager for hugs, but increasingly conscious of her growing maturity. "Let me look at you," I said, holding her at arm's length. "You've grown at least 2 inches. 3, she corrected proudly. "And I got my braces last month. See?" She flashed a smile, revealing a neat row of metal brackets. "Very sophisticated," I approved. "And how's middle school treating you?" "It's mostly good. I joined the drama club and the environmental committee. Oh, and I'm learning clarinet." Her enthusiasm washed over me like warm sunlight after a long winter. This was what I had missed most during our travels, the immediate, unfiltered connection to this remarkable child who carried threads of my DNA but was weaving them into a pattern entirely her own. Allison and Derek appeared behind her, their welcoming smiles genuine if slightly more reserved. The year had left subtle marks on them too. A few more strands of silver in Derek's hair, a new confidence in Allison's posture. They embraced me, warmly, then led us into the house where a small gathering of neighbors and friends awaited. The celebration was lovely. Thoughtfully prepared food, questions about our journey, exclamations over the photographs I showed on my tablet. Eleanor from my apartment complex was there, along with several other neighbors who had become friends during my post-garage renaissance. They seemed genuinely glad to see me, confirming that I had built connections beyond my role as Liv's grandmother. As the evening progressed, I found myself drawn into conversation after conversation, sharing tales of our adventures that elicited both amazement and the occasional concerned gasp. "You went paragliding? At your age?" Through it all, I observed the subtle dynamics of the gathering, the way Derek deferred to Allison on certain topics, the ease with which Liv navigated the adult conversations, the respectful way they all included Barbara in their questions and attention. Near the end of the evening, as guests began to depart, Derek approached me with a glass of wine. "Got a minute for a private chat?" he asked, gesturing toward the back patio. Curious, I followed him outside, where the autumn evening had turned cool enough to require the sweater I'd grabbed on the way out. We sat in the patio chairs facing the garden, which showed signs of recent attention: pruned shrubs, fresh mulch, late-blooming chrysanthemums adding splashes of color. "You've kept the garden nice," I observed, remembering how it had once been exclusively my domain. "Liv has taken it over," he said with obvious pride. "She discovered she has a knack for it, said she wanted to keep it nice for when you came back." He swirled the wine in his glass before continuing. "Which brings me to what I wanted to discuss. Your living arrangements, now that you're back." My guard went up slightly, a reflexive response to the memory of that long-ago conversation about the garage. Derek must have noticed because he quickly added, "Not like before. The opposite, actually." "I'm listening," I said neutrally. "The thing is, Willa, a lot has changed while you were gone. We've all had time to reflect on what happened, how we treated you, what we almost lost through our selfishness." He looked directly at me, his expression unguarded in a way I'd rarely seen. "The garage apartment, the real one, not that makeshift arrangement, has been fully renovated. Proper insulation, heating, plumbing, a complete kitchen. It's a genuine living space now, private and comfortable." I raised an eyebrow, uncertain where this was heading. "We're not asking you to live there," he clarified quickly. "Unless you want to. What I'm trying to say, somewhat inelegantly, is that we want you to know you have options. Your apartment is still available. Eleanor's niece moved out last month. Or the garage apartment, if you'd prefer to be closer to Liv. Or perhaps something else entirely. The thoughtfulness of this approach, offering choices rather than dictating terms, was not lost on me. Thank you, Derek. That's considerate of you. It's the least we could do after everything. He hesitated, then added, Your journey this past year, it's inspired all of us, especially Liv. She talks about her adventurer grandma to everyone who'll listen. Even started a blog about your travels that's become quite popular at her school. This was news to me. A blog? She never mentioned that in our calls. She wanted it to be a surprise. She's been documenting your journey from her perspective. What? She's learned from your experiences, how it's changed her view of what's possible for women as they age. He smiled. It's pretty insightful for an 11-year-old. I felt a swell of emotion at the thought of Liv processing my journey in this way, finding meaning in it beyond the surface adventures. I'd love to read it. She'll show you tomorrow, I'm sure. He set down his wine glass. The point is, Willa, we don't take you for granted anymore. Whatever you decide about where and how you want to live now that you're back, we'll support. We just want you in our lives, on terms that respect your independence and dignity. The contrast between this conversation and the one that had led to my garage exile could not have been more stark. Here was the same man who had once casually relegated me to a storage space, now articulating a genuine understanding of my worth and autonomy. It was a transformation as profound as any I had undergone during our year on the road. I appreciate that, Derek, truly. I'll need some time to consider my options. Barbara and I have a lot to process after this year. He nodded. Of course, no rush. And Willa, thank you for calling that attorney. It was the wake-up call we needed, though I didn't see it that way at the time. As we rejoined the others inside, I found myself reflecting on the strange, circuitous path that had led to this moment. From the humiliation of the garage, to the intervention of Linda Chen, to the unexpected liberation of the road, and now back to a family transformed by my absence. It was a journey none of us could have anticipated or designed, yet its outcomes had enriched us all. Later that night, as Barbara and I settled into our respective rooms at a nearby hotel, our accommodation until more permanent arrangements could be made, she asked the question that had been lingering unspoken between us. So, are you staying? I considered carefully before answering. In Lakeside Heights, yes, but not in the way I did before. Meaning? Meaning I want to maintain the independence we've cultivated this past year. I'm thinking of looking for a small house, something with enough garden space for me to use what I've learned about native plants, maybe a spare room for when you visit. She nodded approvingly. And your relationship with the family? I'll honor our visitation schedule with Liv, but on terms that acknowledge my separate life. I think we've all learned that love doesn't require constant proximity or availability. The truth was, the journey had reminded me that I was more than a grandmother, more than a former teacher, more than a woman of a certain age whose primary value lay in her utility to others. I was Wilhelmina Thorne, traveler, photographer, gardener, storyteller, wilderness enthusiast, late-in-life adventurer. I contained multitudes, as Whitman would say, and I was no longer willing to be defined by a single role, no matter how cherished. The garage incident, painful as it had ultimately been a gift, the discomfort that propelled me out of complacency and into a more authentic expression of my full self. The attorney's letter had been the catalyst, but the true transformation had come from within, from my willingness to claim my worth, assert my needs, and explore life beyond the narrow confines of others' expectations. As I drifted toward sleep in the quiet hotel room, I felt profound gratitude for the journey. All of it, from the humiliation to the triumph. Each step, even the painful ones, had been necessary to bring me to this place of clarity and purpose. Tomorrow would bring decisions, arrangements, conversations about the shape of our lives going forward. But tonight, I rested in the certainty that whatever came next would be by my choice, on my terms, with the full support of a family that had grown as much through my absence as they had through my presence. The call to my attorney had changed everything, not because it had forced concessions from Allison and Derek, but because it had awakened in me the courage to value myself as highly as I had always valued others. In standing up for my dignity in that cold garage, I had unknowingly opened the door to the richest chapter of my life. And as the lights of Lakeside Heights twinkled beyond my window, I knew with absolute certainty that this chapter was far from finished. It was, in many ways, just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.